So thank you for joining this webinar. We have a lot of topics to cover today. And we are first going to have a look back on 2019 and see what has happened. I want to thank OBO for the preparation of a few of the slides that will be presented in this webinar. Let's start with a few metrics showing the excellent health of the Capella world. So this slide shows the geographic footprint of the number of organizations using Capella per countries. The number of organizations using Capella is growing, and it is worth mentioning that in 2019 we've doubled the amount of users of Capella. So altogether today we have counted about 215 organizations using Capella. Here are some examples of organizations who have agreed to have their logo displayed. Of course, some of the usages by these organizations are experimental, are prototyping, but there's also a lot of usage of on major operational projects. Capella is used in a large variety of domains. So this graphic doesn't show academics, service and techno providers are not represented either, but we can see that there's a lot of aerospace and defense, railway, automotive, and energy, and so on. So Capella can really be used in a lot of different domains, as we already saw that in Thales in all our business units. We are particularly happy with the audience of our webinars. This is a good incentive to continue and to create more content, get more operational feedback from different organizations. Some of these webinars were pretty spectacular. I'm thinking about the webinar by Glawe about execution of Capella models and simulation of Capella models. So it was pretty impressive. So we had 7 webinars in 2019, an average of 90 participants, 145 people who registered for today's webinar. And as the webinars are available on YouTube, it is always possible to view them afterwards. There's been some changes on the Capella website. We have added a lot of Capella resources, case studies, tutorials, and so on. So there's more than 100 relevant items in this new resource page that is better organized, either by topics or by kind of material. There's a new page that is an introduction to model-based systems engineering. We have new case studies, including the one of Rolls-Royce from UK. And all the case studies have been translated in Chinese language, and we need to thank Glawe for this translation. There's a new introduction video to Capella that lasts a bit less than 2 minutes. And last but not least, the Capella website has moved from PolarSys to Eclipse, and therefore the address of the Capella website has slightly changed. We've been present in a lot of conferences worldwide. So we have counted more than 20 conferences in which we have delivered more than 35 talks or animated sessions. We have received the Best Paper Award of the INCOSI Symposium last summer for a paper explaining how we see the articulation between models and textual requirements. And we have organized the Capella Day in September, gathering about 80 participants, 17 speakers from 14 countries. And that was a very interesting day. So now I'm going to leave the floor to Juan, who is going to present the first significant evolution of Capella in 2019.
Thank you, Stefan. One of the major evolutions in Capella this year is the enhanced expressivity and new features related to functional chains. This evolution has been funded by Safran Landing Systems. And before presenting you these novelties, let's recall what are and how functional chains are used. In fact, scenarios and functional chains are conceptually close. They both describe capabilities and both represent the functions and functional exchanges that are involved in the realization of the capability in a given context. We can use scenarios and functional chains to describe stories, meaning different cases of how a capability is to be fulfilled. Until now, the main difference between scenarios and functional chains was that scenarios permit to express a chronological dimension. They focus on the temporal positioning of exchanges between functions. And for instance, in this scenario at the left side of the screen, we see a loop construction and an optional path of execution. Note that the positioning is purely contextual to this specific scenario. Functional chains simply express a set of functions and their dependencies. There is no explicit information about control or order of execution of the functions. Neither they can express alternatives, parallel paths, optional paths, as scenario does. Nevertheless, due to their simplicity of construction and their visualization in other diagrams, functional chains are extensively used by systems engineers. These differences in expressivity between scenarios and functional chains have blurred since Capella 1.3.1. We are now able to specify loops, alternatives, sequences, and parallelism in functional chains. Here we see sequence links. We see also loop constructions and alternative constructions. And we still see data constructions, data exchanges between functions in the functional chains. We will do a short demo and we will show the remaining construction, which is the AND construction and is equivalent to the parallel constructions in scenarios. I will switch to my Capella instance here, and I will use the in-flight entertainment system model that you all know because it's available when you download the Capella version. I will base my demo in a certain capability that is called provide audio and video intercommunication means. And let's say that I have this functional chain that is called perform audio announcement, which I have initialized here. And this functional chain is made of, for three functions: send audio announcements, then acquire audio stream from aircraft, and then process audio announcements. First of all, I want to indicate that these functions are to be executed in a sequential way. So I will use the sequence links construction here that is available now in Capella, and I will specify that these sequence links are related to an exchange of data between these functions. So you see that the data exchanges between the functions are not shown in the diagram. That's because I'm using this filter merge associated functional exchange involvements and sequence links without control node. The next step in the demo will be to represent the simultaneous execution of two paths. First, we know that we will need, after processing audio announcement, we will need to broadcast the announcement for each passenger, and in parallel, we will need to interrupt the video on-demand service. For this, I will use a new construction, which is called AND construct, that will create two AND elements and two paths, which will be executed in parallel, represented to be executed in parallel, and sequence link here. And then I will specify which are the functions that are to be executed in each path. So they are written here in my comment. For the first path regarding broadcast the announcement for each passenger, I will use this tool that is function on sequence link, and I will use the filter here, play audio video stream on SIT-TV. So you see that the function is added and the sequence links are rearranged properly. I can continue adding functions into this functional chain until completing the whole path. This is the second path, which is interruption on video on demand service, which is made of the execution of sequential execution of 3 functions. So I can continue until I finish my my 2 paths. So I won't finish because of time reasons, but you understood the principle. The second part of this demo is regarding a second feature that has been developed this year, is regarding the assembly of functional chains. In previous versions of Capella, you could assemble functional chains to manage the complexity of functional chains involving a high number of functions. But you could only assemble functional chains by compatible exchanges and only if functions were at the start or the end of a functional chain. Since version 1.3.1, you can assemble in 2 different ways with more freedom. Let's say that instead of defining this complex functional chain that you see on the screen, you want to define it by assembling less complex functional chains like this one. In this case, we have a sub-functional chains like called functional chain X that is made of functions F3 to F7, and a functional chain, second functional chain, that is made of functions F8, involvement of functions F8 through F10. The first way I can assemble these 2 functional chains is by compatible exchanges, meaning that these are the exchanges, the data exchanges between these functions in the existing data flows. And the second way I can assemble these functional chains is by using by common functions. In this case, we see that both sub-functional chains involve the function f7, which is represented here. So it means that they are both using and executing function f7. So they are assembled this way. Once you have assembled these functional chains, you can expand them or collapse them in in Capella. I will do a very short demo on this topic. I will use the same functional chain that I've been working with, but it's a version that has been made of assembling of sub-functional chains. So in this case, the 2 paths that I described before, broadcast announcements to passengers and interrupt video on-demand services, are specified as sub-functional chains, and I assemble these functions, these functional chains in a, I would say, higher level functional chain that is my perform audio announcement functional chain. I can expand each one of these functional chains to be more explicit in my description, or collapse them again, so I can hide the details of each one of these functional chains. The further description of these 2 features of control on sequencing information in functional chains and the assembly of functional chains has been described in a previous webinar. This is called Functional Chains with Arcadia and Capella. So I really invite you to watch this webinar for more details.
I'm now going to talk about something that I have done a lot of lobbying for. This is probably the deepest, the more fundamental evolution of Capella in the last 5 or 6 years. And it's the way actors are managed in Capella. So basically, we have worked on a more generic and flexible implementation. So until this new version of Capella, actors could not be broken down into sub-actors. Unlike components, it wasn't possible to create sub-actors in any of the Arcadia perspectives. The concepts of scope of responsibility and location were mixed. Anything that was outside the boundary of the system was considered as being an actor, and we'll see in the next slide that reality is sometimes or often more complex. Components in one given project could not be reused as actors in another one, and vice versa, in particular when using rec and rep solutions. And the hard distinction between components and actors made the exploitation less straightforward. By exploitation, I mean the extensions of diagrams, the queries, and so on. So we have changed the way actors are now implemented. So the highlights of the new implementation is that we can now break down actors into sub-actors. This is what is illustrated on this on the first item here. Actors can contain components, and components can contain actors, and we can easily transform a component into an actor and vice versa. This is particularly useful when we assemble models from different parts, when we use libraries and recrep. So how is that visible in the tool? We have basically two concepts: is human and is actor. Is human means it is a person. It cannot be broken down. Actor means this is outside the scope of responsibility of our system of interest. It can be broken down. And the choice between is human or is actor is available in the properties of each element. And this is why I am going to do a very quick demo. I am first going to display a capability diagram like this one. And now, if I click on an actor, I am in the system need analysis. I can select whether this actor is human or not. If it is human, it will be displayed as with a little guy. And if it's not human, it will be displayed with something that looks more like a component, because it's kind of an external system. So we can change that on this dynamically. And if I go now in the logical architecture, for example, I have an architecture diagram, and here I am able to create components inside this component. So until now, nothing new. But I can specify that this component is actually an actor. What does this mean? It means that it is not in the scope of responsibility of our system. However, we need to take it into account within our system, and I'm going to explain that in the following slides. It also means that we can have components within our own scope of responsibility that is actually a human. So this is here, and we change the icon that is available here. Last, we can create sub-actors in the actors that are not human. So this one is going to be just a standard actor, and I can create another one inside it. So I'm going to provide the rationale for these evolutions in the next slides. So first of all, we talk about scope of responsibility. We distinguish between what is inside the scope of responsibility and what is outside the scope of responsibility. So here are a few components. We are in the physical architecture of Capella. So we have a non-human physical actor, a human physical actor, non-human physical component, human physical component. A non-human physical actor is typically an implementation component that is outside the system of interest. For example, any hardware or any external system we interface with. A human physical actor is a person outside the system of interest. For example, the pilot of a plane, if our system is the cockpit, and so on. Non-human physical component is an implementation component within the scope of responsibility. For example, any hardware or that we are using. And human physical component would be a person within the scope of responsibility, a maintenance operator or something that is that we are responsible for. Now we can have a physical actor within a physical actor. For example, a microprocessor on a board, and both are outside the scope of responsibility. The opposite is a microprocessor on a board, but both are inside the scope of responsibility. These are the yellow ones. But we can also mix the things. We could have a microprocessor that is part of the scope of responsibility, meaning that we are responsible for delivering this microprocessor. But this microprocessor will be plugged into a board that is actually provided by someone else and that we consider as an actor, as external to the system. And we also have the opposite. We could have a microprocessor that is actually outside our scope of responsibility, but that we need to put on our board and that is going to consume resources and that we have to take into account in our, for example, non-functional analysis. If we continue trying to find example, we can have a software behavior component executed on a board, and that both of them would be outside of the scope of responsibility, and the opposite, a software behavioral component executed on an implementation component that are both in our scope of responsibility. We could also mix and have a software that we are delivering that is actually executed on a board that is outside the scope of responsibility. Or we can have to deploy a software that is developed by an external organization and have it run on our own resources. And finally, we could also have pieces of software like a library or module that we have to integrate into one of our software. Altogether, a lot of combinations are possible, and this new implementation of vectors make that possible. This slide is a summary of what is possible, what are the icons for each combination, and can they have subcomponents or not. So I'm not going to describe that. You can study this slide afterwards when you watch a video on YouTube. Refactoring the way actors are implemented also open an opportunity to change the way the structural parts of models are organized. So we have introduced more flexibility. We have removed some technical concepts like the context element, and we have removed the actor packages. And now you are able to organize the components or the structural elements exactly as you want. Now I'm going to leave the floor to Juan again.
Yes, so these were the two major evolutions that we have implemented in the last months. Now we will present some core diagramming evolutions that we hope that will be very useful for you in the following months. The first one is the use of Eclipse capabilities. What is this? This feature will allow you to deactivate and activate sets of features in Capella. These features are called capabilities, but they are not to be confused with system capabilities. It's not about the capabilities of the system you are designing, it's the capabilities of the Capella tool. So I will do a very short demo on this topic. I will reopen the session of my in-flight entertainment system example. In some cases, in some of our use cases of Capella, we find people that work a lot of software-intensive systems. They don't perform functional analysis, but rather focus on the components of the architecture, the physical components of the architecture, and the interfaces and data interfaces between them. So for these kind of use cases, it's useful to filter all the features of Capella that are not going to be used by these users. I will use this preferences menu that you should know and search for capabilities, Capella capabilities. You see here. And I will be able, for instance, to hide all perspectives of Arcadia perspectives, but physical architecture, and hide all features related to functional analysis. When I apply this capabilities filter, you see that the Activity Explorer has completely changed. It only includes the physical architecture perspective, and within the physical architecture perspective, the set of tools, that set of diagrams that you can create, and the model elements that you can create in the diagrams is, well, quite reduced. As you see, you can't create data flow diagrams, but you can still create components. You can define interface scenarios and other features that will allow you to work with interfaces and data interfaces between components. I will go back to my preferences and reactivate all the perspectives and features that I will. Another feature, a small feature, is the possibility to export this configuration and import it in another Capella tool environment or another workspace in your Capella installation. So it's quite useful if you want to set a set of capabilities of the tool that will be used by a group of people. Another core feature that has been developed is the possibility to to create scenarios out of functional chains. As I said before, functional chains are quite useful because they are simple to build, but in some cases we will need to create more detailed scenarios out of these functional chains. So you will see here that I will create a demo of this as well. If I see my capabilities, system analysis, capabilities, and I will go to provide audio and video communication, I see that there is a broadcast audio announcement functional chain, which is described here. This is quite simple. And I can now use a transition and functional chain to functional scenario initialization. So this tool will create a scenario that is called broadcast audio announcement as well. Don't forget to create the diagram that is that represent this this scenario, and this scenario is created. Of course, as functional chains by default, they do not convey sequence information. Capella will apply a set of fixed rules to initialize the scenario diagram. So most commonly, you will need to rearrange the diagram to specify the sequence of operations. In order to further accelerate the process, we could exploit the sequence links in the functional chains or operational process, because the feature is also available for operational process, but this has not been implemented in this version. A third Capella core evolution is about filters and search. So regarding filters, if you want, by default, the Capella Explorer, I will now here, the Capella Explorer will show you a set of elements of the model, not all elements of the models. If for any reason you need to show all model elements in the Project Explorer, you can use one of the quick filters. In this case, deselect all filters, because the filter is about you are hiding, and you will see that there are a lot of model elements that are shown in your Project Explorer. You want to go back to the default configuration. You will select default filters, and if you have defined some filters and customizations here, you have selected some of the predefined available filters, you can go back and use the recent filters tool that will allow you to go quickly, to filter very quickly the Project Explorer you have. Regarding the search functionality, you will be able, this search bar has been quite simplified. So now just need to type something in this bar, and you will find the elements that include, for instance, the word maintenance in your model. And there are some search options that are quite useful. You can search, for instance, by default, the search is done in the name of the model element, but you can also search in description of the model element, and you can select, case-sensitive, select a case-sensitive search for a more precise search. And of course, I almost forgot, in the diagrams that you are working on, don't forget that you also have some different ways to search for models. I will diagram here, and don't forget that you can also the Ctrl-O key shortcut, I would say, to search for elements in your view, not in the model, but in the view of the model. Another Capella core evolution is the show that in diagram editor, which is another shortcut, F10, which will now manage multiple selection and navigation to related multiple diagram elements, and it will also manage selection in all open diagrams.
Okay, we also have, as every year, added new queries in the semantic browser. The first one is about physical ports that are now more completely described. Another one is when you select a function in a sequence diagram, you now have a link towards the related functions. It's surprising, but it was not available in the previous versions. There's more complete queries on classes and interfaces and so on. The same for data associations or generalizations. And the same goes for capabilities that are now described more precisely, including inclusion and extension links. There are a few others, but we didn't mention them in this slide. Another thing that has been developed or improved, because it was already existing, is the detection of cycles in data packages. When you use Capella to generate code, it is important that your data models don't have cycles. Otherwise, that makes things a bit complicated. So we have improved the algorithm that is used to detect these cycles. And when we run, there's first of all an option to have a live analysis and an automated prevention of data cycle creation. But there's also more accurate information when you use model validation to identify the elements that are involved in cycles. There's been a few additional validation rules. So I would say something like 40 or 50 additional validation rules. Some of them are about better analysis of the realization links between Arcadia perspectives. And some of them are about the functional chains, including the sequence and all the constructs that Juan talked about. And there are a few ones that are dedicated to checking the completeness of capability descriptions, either with sequence diagrams or functional chains. As in the Arcadia method, we put functional chains and scenarios as a central element of the approach. And finally, even though we presented that last year already, we have improved the move to library tool, which is now able to analyze in live whether you are able to move something from a project to a library and to compute the missing dependencies and so on. So this is all in all that allows for a more secure move of elements or group of elements from a project to a library. Back to Juan.
Yeah, so there have been as well some few fixes on Capella core. First, now extensions properties views for Capella elements now properly displays all available property values and property value groups from current projects and, most importantly, from references libraries. We have completed the set of tools that are available in the contextual capability realization involvement diagrams and contextual interface, detailed external internal interface diagrams. So you see that with other new tools that were lacking. There have been as well some improvements on diagrams ergonomics, and maybe the most important ones are the fact that you can now move XAB, SAB, LAB, or logical system architecture, logical architecture, and physical architecture diagrams in the project hierarchy. For instance, you can create a package that is dedicated to a set of architecture diagrams. So now we have improved we freed this the position of the diagrams in the project explorer. And secondly, we can now insert blank spaces in sequence diagrams when you are developing your sequence diagrams in an, I would say, incremental way. Regarding documentation is the addition of a dedicated Capella chapter in the tips and tricks help menu. So now when you search for tips and tricks in general the Eclipse platform, you will see the dedicated Capella tips and tricks, which we hope will be useful for you on taking over on Capella.
Okay, Team for Capella. This Team for Capella is a commercial add-on provided by Obeo, and it allows for live collaboration on models. It provides fine-grained automated locking and a standard and secure data access, for example, relying on LDAP directories. So Team for Capella is not new, but there's been a few improvements. In particular, it is now available with Capella 1.4. We have added a few additional administration features, including a stronger check of the consistency of the database. And now diagrams are taken into account in the commit history. So if you attended the webinar last year, I presented the way that we are able to finally monitor or follow the changes that are associated to each commit by each user. Now diagrams are taken into account. There's also a new who is looking tooltip on elements and better communication, better interfacing with LDAP directories. All along these last years, there's been continuous huge efforts on performance, Team for Capella performance, and we thought it was worth being mentioned. And as I'm not going to precisely describe all these metrics, but we can see a strong enhancement of performance in the last two or three versions of Capella.
Regarding some improvements on add-ons, we will start with the requirements add-on. You will see now that requirements can now be linked directly to diagrams. This is consistent with what the paper we talked about before. You will also see that the attributes of requirements in the requirements add-on can now be displayed in the tabular views and tabular editors, so mass edit and mass visualization. And that there is a better, enhanced integration of requirements in the output that is provided by the HTML export add-on.
In the open source add-ons, there's filtering. It is pretty frequent that there's a need to be able to filter some of the models regarding specific concerns. It can be because you want to annotate elements with increments. well, the increments in which they are going to be available. You want to master the data that you exchange with customers or subcontractors. You have export controls, export control concerns, and so on. So the open sourcing of this add-on has been funded by Ariane Group. And I'm just going to explain the concept, and because we are a bit late, I will probably skip the demo part of it. So let's say we have an overall model that is made of all these functions, and this set of functions will be available in version 1. This set of functions will be available in version 2, and this set of functions is going to be available in version 3. So in Capella, I'm now able to add tags or criteria on these elements to specify in which version they will be available. But then there are in our system some of the functions that we really want to keep internal. We don't want to disclose them. There are some functions that are related to subcontractor A. We want to provide subcontractor A with visibility on these functions, and the same for subcontractor B. So we can use the filtering add-on to mark each of these elements with specific information. So, and for example, if I want to provide a model that corresponds to version 1 and version 2 to my subcontractor A, I need to be able to automatically get rid of everything that is from version 3 and everything that is internal only and subcontractor A or B. So basically, I want the result to be what is in the middle. And this is what the filtering add-on is about. We can define filtering criteria. We can define expected results. We can mark any element with these criteria, preview the expected results in diagrams or in a tabular view that can be exported to CSV or whatever. So we had planned a demo, but as we are running a bit late, I'm going to skip this part. The filtering add-on is available on the Capella website, and it's compatible with Capella 1.3.1 and Capella 1.4.
Regarding M2Doc, which is the Capella add-on for generating Word documents from your Capella models, well, just a short recall of what M2Doc is able to provide you. It's a simple syntax and easy of use. You use templates in Word directly to generate Word documents, can include Capella diagrams and tables, features incremental generation, and produces an usable error reporting. So it's an open source add-on provided by OBO. And what is new on M2Doc is the fact that it supports rich text properties now. There are new wizards to create M2Doc projects and templates. There's a progress bar on generation and validation process, support of alignment in table cells, generated HTML documentation for custom services, new commands to package M2Doc generator, and instruction to create a template from a template in recursion. So as a summary, you see that almost all add-ons are now available and compatible with version 1.4 of Capella, except maybe a property value management tool and diagram styler, which will most probably will be available and compatible in February, and mode and states configuration, which has not started yet. Now we will take a few minutes the remaining time to talk about the next steps, what we are working on, and we will go in very, very quickly on 5 topics of the topics that we will cover this year. First of all, we hope to work on HTML generation, improvement of HTML generation, including additional information and customization capabilities. We aim to implement one of the Arcadia concepts that are missing in Capella, which is the functional path. We aim to enrich Capella diagrams with text, for instance, adding summary and description, I mean showing the summary and description in the diagrams. We intend to improve tabular visualization and edition, for instance, by column specifications, saving configurations, and other features. And last but not least, we aim to work on implementation of bridges with other tools, for instance, Enterprise Architect and Cameo System Modeler. There are some upcoming webinars and case studies. There will be more than that, but these are those that we have identified yet, so for now. Maplesoft will present an adapter to Capella. CNX Motion will present their experience with collaborative system architecture development within a joint venture organization. OVO will present some content about Team for Capella, and Assystem will present their initiative that is called Nuclear Valley, and there will be others. We will keep you informed on that. There will be very, very soon a new case study that will be published regarding an autonomous train project, so keep posted on that. It's very, very quite interesting. And there will be other case studies that will be developed, CNX Motion about the autonomous driving, and Assystem on the same topic that I presented just before. There will be some events on which we will be present, so you can contact us and meet us on these events. There will be in Cozy International Workshop in a week or two in Los Angeles. Stefan will be the keynote speaker of the MBSE workshop. We'll talk about fostering model-based systems engineering in the engineering culture. There will be the INCOSI Healthcare Workgroup Systems Engineering Conference in April, in which Capella will sponsor the event, will have its own booth, will present talks and tutorials. Siemens realized live in Las Vegas this year, so it's a good destination to go, I think. And the INCOSI International Symposium in July in Cape Town, which is a quite nice place to be this year, in which Capella will be sponsoring, will have its own booth, and there will be many people representing Capella in these conferences. And of course, the Capella Day 2020 this year. So we hope you will be present on this Capella Day this year. I think that's all. We have covered a lot of content on this almost an hour. Yeah, we are ready now for questions and answer sessions, and thank you very much for the attention.
Okay, thanks Juan and thanks Stefan. I have to say it's really nice to have this very good overview of the work achieved last year. So now, as you say, it's time for questions. We have a few questions, but I'm sure that the attendee will fill the question and answer window during the time we answer the first one. So, first question from Marek Sheni is, what is the semantics of a component being part of an actor in logical architecture? Can you give some example?
Yeah, I would say that already in the logical architecture, I can already need to show that I will have to provide something, can be hardware, software, whatever, but I will have to provide something that will be actually running outside my own environment. And in that case, I would put this component that is part of my responsibility inside the actor, the logical actor. I don't know whether it's going to be a breakdown, whether it's going to be a deployment. In the logical architecture, it's not what I'm interested in, but I know that I will have something that will be outside my own environment, and that is one of the reasons why we would put a system logical component inside a logical actor.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Second question: can we fly over? Okay, can we fly over the logical architecture and then go from system analysis to physical architecture directly?
Yeah, well, in the tool you can't. I mean, when you talk about fly, I mean, you're maybe talking about the transition between one perspective to the other. So you can do perspective from two consecutive, transitions from on two consecutive perspectives. So you can transition from system analysis to logical architecture, and from logical architecture to physical architecture. Nevertheless, there are some projects. I mean, we have seen other projects doing some projects doing this. They make a transition from system analysis to logical architecture, and they keep the logical architecture as it is, and they transition again to physical architecture, and then they work on physical architecture. It would be interesting to.
This is something that we ideally we would be able to just say, I'm not going to use the logical architecture, and then have a direct refinement from system need analysis to physical architecture. But right now, it's not in the roadmap. Next question.
Yes. Next question. M2Doc, as GenDoc seems to be based on month two. I don't know this acronym anyway. What are the difference between M2Doc and GenDoc? In which case do you propose to use which of those two generators?
I'm not able to answer this question. I know a lot of projects who use M2Doc with Capella. I don't know many projects who use GenDoc. At least I haven't been involved, so I don't know. I'm not able to answer this question. This is probably a question for OBO at some point.
Yeah, and maybe in a nutshell, I can try an answer. Is we decided to create M2Doc because we weren't really happy with GenDoc. So it could be a very, very brief answer to this question. But you can contact me and we can elaborate a bit. So next one, when you mention interfaces with tools, which tools have you in mind?
Okay, so we mentioned Enterprise Architect and Cameo System Modeler. We have been doing some preliminary work on integration, interface with Simulink, MathWorks tool, and there are other tools that would be interesting, and if people in the community want to go further onto these details, of course we are open to further discuss on that.
Okay, thanks. Last time I attempted XHTML documentation generation via command line wasn't functional. Is that changed in 1.4?
I don't remember what is the last time the person attended, but to me, it is supposed to be functional already with Capella 1.3.x. So it already now it's supposed to be available. So I don't know if there's a bug or anything else, but to my knowledge, it is supposed to be available.
Yeah. What are the plans for interfacing with Open Modelica?
It's not in our roadmap, but again, we are open to discuss.
Yeah. Okay, the question is pretty similar. Any bridge to MATLAB Simulink?
Yeah, no, like I said before, so there are some. We are working on some preliminary work on integration with Simulink.
Sorry, the sound wasn't so good. So could you repeat your answer?
Yeah, sorry. So I was saying that we, as I said before, there are some preliminary works from our side on integration with Simulink. Yeah.
We are also discussing with MathWorks, and if any organization is really strongly, actively interested in this bridging and wants to join the effort, we really welcome them to contact us and work with us with MathWorks. We on the Thales side, we are working with some pilot projects to try and explore what it means to have this continuity beyond just having the tooling connection. We really want to study the workflow and the articulation between MBSE and simulation.
Okay, are there plans to update the book on Capella? Or maybe it's a books because there's two books.
Well, I don't think the Arcadia book needs a major update. It's true that the Capella book is closely related to the version of Capella, and as Capella versions change every year, it's more difficult for the book to stay up to date. First of all, you should talk about that with its author, so Pascal Roch. On our side, we don't have any concrete plan to put that on a book or to work on that topic.
Okay, thanks. Is it possible to store Capella tool option in profiles so a user can select different views on projects?
Yes. So what Juan has demonstrated is the capabilities. So the way to to choose what is available or not. You also have Capella preferences that where you can choose, for example, the validation rules that you want. But all these Eclipse preferences can be exported in a file that can be reused by other people, imported in their workspace. And so you could associate different workspaces to different preference files. So yes, it is possible to share the configuration settings for that. And if you go and read the embedded documentation of Capella, there's something that is called the configuration project that allows to make sure that all the contributors of one single project will use the same configuration file. So just have a look to the manual, to the user guide.
Okay, thanks. Just before the next question, I would like to highlight the fact we are reaching the end of the question. So if you have some questions in the attendees, this will be your last chance to ask. Okay, next one. What are the validation models based on? Is the validation of Capella?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, it's the same for me. I have great expectation from you regarding this one. So I'm sorry, Sophia. Maybe you can contact us and maybe we try to discuss about this point.
I don't know if Sophia is talking about the models that the team uses to validate a version of Capella, or yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, sorry for me. And I think the last question would be for me. Can an enterprise work concurrently on a Capella model? And so the answer is yes, using Team for Capella, which is a commercial add-on provided by OBO. So if you're interested by this kind of concurrent modeling, well, you can contact me or contact OBO, and we'll be more than happy to provide you with it. Oh, well, we have a lot of new questions. When presenting configurations options, change have been shown on Activity Explorer. Is it considered true on Project Explorer?
I mean, I guess they are talking about the capabilities and the fact that some perspectives were hidden in the Activity Explorer. So if the question is, it's possible to, for instance, avoid creation of functions in the Project Explorer, the answer is yes.
Okay, you mentioned configuration management. Are general principles of configuration management also applied in Capella with baselining, chain process?
Yeah. I mentioned tracking of changes in Team for Capella. So this is a fine-grained tracking that where we're able to identify the content of each commit. But this is only in the Team for Capella environment. Our vision on configuration management and branches is that our projects use Git and the file versions that are exported from Team for Capella. So Git can call the Capella diff merge, and we really exclusively rely on Git to do configuration management and management of branches.
Okay, is the location of the next Arcadia Capella Day already known? So the question is also for me. We are working on it. We have some places in mind, but it's a bit too soon to announce it. Yes. So, well, definitely it will be in Europe, but well, too soon for me to announce that. Is there any work or progress on safety security viewpoint?
Yeah, so specifically regarding security, the short answer is yes. We don't know yet the status of this viewpoint.
Yeah, well, the status, meaning we have a viewpoint that has been developed. We don't know yet, and by we I mean Thales, we don't know yet how and if it will be shared or not. And regarding safety, there's a coupling with safety architect.
Yeah, that's already very good.
But if ever you are really interested by security or cyber security feature with Capella, Juan published a paper last year in the INCOSI conference, so you can probably get this through the INCOSI website, and feel free to contact us.
Okay, thank you both for all those insights. Well, we may have a question, but we are out of time, so it's not hesitate to contact us if you have additional questions. As usual, we would be grateful if you can give us some feedback about today. When you will leave this webinar, you will have a satisfaction form, so please fill this form and express your opinion about this webinar, and also express your opinion on the future topic you want to be addressed in your webinar. And once again, I would like to thank you all for attending this webinar, and I wish you a nice day or a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.